Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us here. My name's Paul Corrigan. I'm the Program Manager at the CEnvP Scheme. We have with us also Warren Pump and Mike Nash, who will be answering questions at the end of the presentation, some that have come through previously and any that might come through during the session. We also have Gabriella from our Program Office, who will also give a couple of thoughts through the session and will help support me with taking any questions in the chat that I might miss during the conversation. Please add your, actually Gabby, could you write this down for me in the chat? Please add your questions into the chat so we can come across them. And if for any reason we can't complete them in the time, or we do need to come back to, we will send any of those responses out to the whole group that's joined today after the session. As noted there, please be aware we're recording this session. It will later be posted on the CEnvP Scheme YouTube channel as a webinar for those interested in the site contamination certification. If you don't consent to, mostly it's going to be your insignias there and your acronym there next to your name, initials, that'll be there. But if you don't, please leave now. But we will forward all the recordings to everyone that's registered, not just those attending, and also the slides will share those too. So we will kick off. There's a few things to get through, and post the question session. Also, please hang around a little bit longer, because Georgina Kerr from ACLCA Queensland will be talking a bit more about your mentoring program that we look forward to learning about. So this is primarily a focus on the CEnvP site contamination specialisation, and also I will go over some other details about the scheme, which will hopefully you find a bit more relevant. So the overview on the scheme, and then the site contamination process and requirements, followed by questions, and then some information on the mentoring session. So about CEnvP, CEnvP has been around since 2004. The intent has been to certify environmental practitioners rather than the academic institutions from where people gain their qualifications. The idea was originally set up to meet a growing community demand for more accountability from the sectors and industry and government. The certification scheme now certifies environmental and social professionals against ethics and competency, and there's a range of different certifications to meet those needs. It's a rigorous and hands-off process where it's measured against real industry recognised criteria developed by industry for industry. Each of our specialisations, for example, have a specialist environmental advisory committee set up, and they range up to 11 members, and they constantly are reviewing the specialisation itself, and have a broad member base from not only consultants but also academia, associations and groups, and also regulators. Currently, there's 1,102 CEnvPs across Australia and New Zealand. They've got 12% growth in the last financial year, and that's a pretty consistent growth on the years. It's compounding. The scheme itself, based on the ISO 17024 for the requirements for bodies operating certification of persons, the really important component that the CEnvP scheme, CEnvP board work towards, and there's some important elements there in ensuring that the processes are rigorous. We also do our own internal auditing yearly, and we're currently doing a lot of work in the past 12 months for not only the ISO 17024, but also setting our systems up in place against the 9001 quality management systems, which essentially means we are also working towards a continuous and continual improvement of our systems and processes. Mentioning the growth and the focus, the CEnvP scheme is purposed to not only serve the community of practitioners, but also to continue to partner, engage, and like we're doing today, and we thank ACLCA Queensland for the opportunity to present to members, to advocate the value of certification. The scheme is not a political body in any shape or form. We do focus on certification. Our main messaging is to get out there and to prove the value of the certified practitioner, and not to be a lobby group as such. And we leave that wonderful work to the organisations like the ACAs, the EINZ, the ALGAs, the Wastemen's, etc., and all the other great professional organisations that their remit. We focus on certification, and we try and develop our certification types to be what's needed. And also ensure that the integrity of certification by constantly reviewing and ensuring that we're working towards a better outcomes for not just the scheme itself, but for a useful certification. The types of certifications that there are out there, we've just, as you can see, there's a range. And at the very bottom there, social impact assessment was launched in the last few weeks at the NZ conference. The site contamination, you can see highlighted, is by far the largest specialist certification, pushing 300, and that will be probably gained at the next review process at the end of this month. The general certification is by far a very important certification. The site contamination itself requires a minimum of 8 years of experience in site contamination. The applicants submit reports on their work for the review and a discussion with at the panel stages, and requires a lot of written testimony and addressing the key proficiencies required for that certification. The site contamination specialisation across Australia, you can see, you can just about pick where there's a strong regulatory requirement. You can see with New South Wales being the largest number there. Queensland has 24 certified, and would love to have more coming through from Queensland. It's a really important part of starting to become regulatory demand. You can see for the New South Wales there, I have first that's a absolute requirement for work under their policies. The EINZ is listed as a prescribed organisation in the EPA at Queensland under Schedule 8 for auditor applicants as appropriately qualified. And then if we dig a little bit deeper, we'll find that in the Queensland Auditor Handbook for Contaminated Land, under certification, that an acceptable certification includes the CEnvP site contamination, and it also notes that the general certification, those that do not hold the site contamination especially, is not sufficient to be to gain that to be recognised. So this highlights that it is a growing thing, and it continues to grow across Australia and New Zealand in many jurisdictions, as can be seen across the country and New Zealand. Two different ways of gaining certification. You have the certification general, and you have the certification specialisations. The specialisations all have a similar minimum requirement of experience and qualifications. However, for each one, there's obviously Obviously the proficiencies are different, but for the most part, there's the need to have a relevant degree. We'll go on to the next slide for the site contamination. That's for both the general and specialisation. For the general, you need at least a minimum of full-time experience within the last 10 years. And with all specialisations, you need a minimum of 10 years across a period of time of up to 17 years, 10 years of minimum of 10 years of experience. Again, we'll touch on that at next slide. A detailed CV, we can't stress this enough. The detailed in there, it's the point of the application submission is to be able to make it easy for those reviewing your application to see and understand your experience. You need to provide written responses to competencies and proficiencies and supporting and evidence. And with the site contamination, you need to provide at least 4 reports to show that. And then you need to have 3 referees. And I was just going to ask Gabriella to talk a little bit more about this. Gabby is one of our program office team that vets applications at the first stage to ensure they're full enough. And Gabby, I'll just let you take it away for a moment.
Thanks, Paul. So we ask for 3 referees to support your applications. For a referee to be considered eligible, they need to have known the applicant for 2 years in a professional capacity. We ask for 1 referee that is external from your place of work, 1 referee that is an experienced site contamination professional, so they're either certified themselves as a site contamination specialist practitioner, or they are eligible to become certified themselves, and you can find the eligibility criteria for that on our website. We ask the applicants contact all 3 of their referees before they're nominated, but ultimately the applications team will get in contact with the referees and ask them to fill out a referee report. We'll specifically ask 2 questions, one of which around the applicant's competency and experience, and another around professional conduct.
Thanks, Gab. Is there a question there from Jen?
I've just got one of our members in the waiting room.
Okay, let's let them in. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you.
We'll monitor that. Thanks for that.
Okay,
I thought it was set to let them all in whenever. Okay. Thanks, Gab. That's a good explanation. And the reason I requested Gab to go into a bit more detail is because we do have this question asked quite often about the referees, and this is something that is automated at the submission stage. So make sure you word up your referees before pressing submit, because once you hit your submitted application, it then shoots out immediately an automated message to those 3 that you noted down. Make sure they're ready, and that'll ensure a more smoother application process, so we're not waiting at our end with it sitting in limbo waiting for the full information to come through before it can progress to the next stages. Our commitment to CPD, 100 points every 2 years, and what we like to see, and this really supports application, as a detailed plan. So essentially, we don't require a full list of what you've done for the last 2 years, but if you can evidence that, wonderful. If not, essentially, we'd love to see a detailed plan come through, because that will be questioned at further stages of the application process. Agreements to the ANZ Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct, and that's an extensive list, and also in that's talking to a code, which I'm sure the ACLCA also has. There's nothing out of the ordinary in that, and essentially that you're an ethical practicing practitioner, and you continue to do that every 2 years as part of the CPD review. We also ensure that ask that question at the recertification stage. And then finally, a signed and witnessed statement of claim stating that everything that you've said and submitted is true and accurate. Now, a little bit more on the site contamination specific dig a bit further. So for the site contamination, you'd need either an engineering degree, science degree, or degree with a substantial environmental component, and that would constitute the minimum requirement. We also have a grandparent clause, and if you've been around for a lot of years, then can evidence that when you were working previously, there was no requirement or option, or you lived regionally, etc. There's other pathways there, but this is the general, the straightforward pathway. A minimum of 10 years of environmental practice over the past 15 to 17 years is required to be eligible for any CEnvP specialisation, and that's under the current bylaw requirements governing the CEnvP scheme. For the SC, a minimum of 8 years is required for site contamination. So you still need to have 10 years of experience, or more, with at least 8 being in site contamination, and that also helps to support the site contamination certification being recognised by a number of the regulators that recognise it. For example, the Queensland one, I think, requires 8 years experience in SC. At least the most recent 3 years must be supported by documentary evidence, such as reports or other publications, and all the work experience periods must be related to environmental practice. So IT won't work. And also, if you're an accredited auditor already through a regulator, you're only required to complete the CEnvP general application requirements, because we deem that the requirements in submitting to become an auditor is already of a nature that meets the requirements. And also, I haven't mentioned the word NEPM at any stage yet. That's also part of it. The CEnvP schemes, SC specialisation meets the minimum requirements for those in the NEPM, and that's also similar to these auditors' accreditations. Now, did I see there's a question there? If you already have CEnvP in general, do you need to fulfil an application requirements again? I'll let you throw this one, Gab.
Thanks for your question, Alex. So you won't need to do the entire application process again. If you're already general, you won't be asked to resubmit any proof of education. We won't be asking the ethical questions again, the CPD questions, or the commitment to sustainability. So we would refer to this as an upgrade if you're going from general to site contamination. So we will be asking to submit those reports. We will be asking for 3 new referees, and we will be asking for work experience, but you don't have to do everything all over again. So thanks for your question.
Thanks, Gab. Okay, to the steps of certification. It's a 5-step process. So I guess your big job is to get all your documents together, get everything signed, find your degree, wherever it might be, get them all signed and ready, complete the application. Once it's all full and you feel you're ready to go, you submit that, pay fees, and then the first step is for the program office team to review that the information provided is made in full. If your referees take a while to come through, that your application will sit there in limbo until they all come through. If there's anything that's missing, we'll chase that up. But once it's gone past that first step and it's all been collated, it'll then follow on to a site contamination specialist registrar for screening, and then their role will be to review the work. So the program office doesn't review the work, they just ensure that it's all there. The role of the specialist is to try and gain that understanding. It's really important for, as I mentioned before, a detailed CV, all those types of things. More is more. The more that they can get a feel and understanding and see what your skills and knowledge are like, that's a best way for you to move through to the next stage. All going well, and the registrar deems that you're ready to move through the next stage. That'll then come back to the program office, and then the program office will start to organise a panel interview, and you'll be advised at these different stages along the way of how you're tracking, and then we will seek 3 CEnvP SCs to attend an interview with yourself, and at that point, that's where that'll be put together. Once that time and date has been arranged, and that can be a few weeks to get there, then the interview will take place, and there'll be a bunch of questions going on. I'll go in a little bit more detail on what is in that interview at the next slide. And then post-interview, it'll then come back to the office again. We'll collate the reports from all the panel members, including the chair, who does an overarching recommendation with the agreement of all the members. It will then be compiled, and then every 6 to 8 weeks there is a what's called the Board Application Review Committee, the BARC, and they review all the information again and support either the decision of the panel, or might go back for asking a bit more information if it's not overly clear. And then once there's a formal recommendation, that'll be taken to a stage of a call it second BARC, a second board approval, and that's where you'll have the majority of board to ratify their decision, and that will be either approved, certification, deferral, or rejection. So in those 2 main stages, the written application, the second step, will be assessed by that registrar, looking at the competency assessments, looking at the codes, looking at the commitment to PD, looking at the work experience and qualifications, and verifying everything again. And then once moving through to the assessment, there is a case study which is also undertaken. That'll be sent through to the applicant just prior to review. The case study is a big innovation that's happened there in the last 6 months, where we now have multiple case studies which are choice dependent on the kind of for the applicant. It's then chosen the case study, so we're not seeing a repeat of the same case study, and word getting out that everyone knows what it's all about, and it has interchangeable scenarios in it, and the set of ethical scenarios to be re-asked of the applicant regarding site contamination, a discussion on the PD, again some more questions about experience and qualifications, and it's the intent is to be more of a discussion than a discussion interview, more so than a interrogation or anything like that. The idea is to try and elicit and understand the experience that someone has. It's not meant to be a scary proposition in any way. Just for clarity, the way that it's been defined here is site contamination practice is a specialised professional area involving a number of disciplines. The practitioners must have a range of competencies and be able to recognise the need for support and professional advice beyond their own expertise when assessing contamination and its effect on land use and the environment. Site contamination assessments required by regulator and planning authorities for the management of contaminated sites and in development approval processes. An SC practitioner must have the ability to draw together knowledge from a variety of sources and disciplines. The 6 outside, the 6 for competencies that is required for proficiency in functional. The proficiency is required in determining the nature, cause and significance of site contamination, preliminary assessment of site contamination, detailed assessment involving the characterisation of site contamination, professional practice in relation to site contamination, and then functional in risk assessment of site contamination, remediation and management of site contamination. If you go to CEnvP.org, you'll find this in detail under the guidance notes section. If you go to requirements, then guidance notes and site contamination, you'll find every dot point, that 6 or 8 on each of those individual numbers there. And as an outcome, you'll be a site contamination practitioner. And along with that comes all these goodie bags. Fees to apply for a flat application, $775 for a new application. It's a lot less than that for if you're already certified. Can't remember off the top of my head. And then there's an annual renewal fee of $585, and where those monies goes into the application process. There's a lot of cost involved with getting someone through the process, including obviously office and technologies, and the annual review and renewal fees. They go towards the continued support of the certification, marketing, and a component of every 2 years as a requirement to be recertified, and also that captures some of those resource and costs to that. So that's pretty much the end of the presentation. I'm going to unshare, but for now, if you'd like to write any of these detail down, we will now ask some preloaded questions, and please, if you have any, put them into the chat. Okay. So a couple of those that have come through, I will ask. Here's the first one: is international experience in the contaminated land industry considered? Mike, could you answer that one?
Yeah, sure, Paul. Yes, international experience is considered relevant. We've certainly certified a number of people who have international experience, and of course we certify people not just from Australia but from New Zealand as well, so there is an international element there already, but certainly international experience is taken into account, but obviously you will need some degree of local experience, Australian experience or New Zealand experience, because of the requirement to have a working knowledge of NEPM, and obviously local regulations and guidelines as well.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
Would you like to add anything, Warren, to this question?
Not to that, no. I just
Okay.
simply reiterate
Yes.
what Mike said, that international experience is highly valued.
I'll just quickly knock this one out, and I think it was covered in the presentation. It was noted a number of members that interview panels often comprise individuals who are not contaminated land specialists themselves. For clarity, we haven't seen that for a number of years. We have now, as you can see, nearly 300 certified, and we have a great pool of resourcing of those volunteers to support the panel process. So there is no, they are not certified. If they're not certified, they're not on the panel. There's a question here on clarity of the 8 years experience. Warren, would you like to talk to this? I know we've as a scheme, and even for the advisory committee, we've approached this one a number of times. The 8 years of 10, where that comes from and why, and any other thoughts you might have of being eligible when you might not be working full time throughout your entire career.
Firstly, I should just emphasise that when you see the list of proficiencies that are required for a site contamination certified practitioner, there's a range of areas there, areas of work that take some years for most practitioners to acquire sufficient proficiency, fluency and confidence in their skills. And that doesn't happen overnight. The 8 in 10 years for site contamination is a yardstick for us, and that is a measure that applies to the full-time practitioner that has worked in site contamination as a career area of specialty. Saying that, we recognise that many practitioners don't have a continuous period of professional experience and will time to time take breaks in their career for whatever reason, parental leave and other, and may not feel they have meeting the criteria for continuous 8 years out of 10. We assess every application on its merits. We look at the applicant and their level of experience, their breadth of experience in their career, and try to come to a view about whether the 8 in 10, the spirit of the 8 in 10 has been met. So I can't provide a hard and fast rule for people that may be part-time or may have taken time off in their career for a number of years, except to say that please contact the office to discuss your situation if you feel you'd like to. Please go online to CEnvP.org and do the eligibility assessment online, and then come to a view. Talk to other certified practitioners if you can. Perhaps you have a mentor in your organisation. Perhaps you have a senior colleague that you can get some advice from. But rest assured, your application will be considered seriously.
Yeah, I might just add there, Warren, that the 8 years qualification for CEnvP SC is not entirely different to the Queensland auditor requirements for contaminated land. The handbook specifies at least 8 years experience in a wide range of applications. In fact, the applicant should be able to demonstrate that their experience in contaminated site work is broadly based. That's what the Queensland auditor handbook says, and that's essentially not that different to qualifying for SC under CEnvP.
Thanks both. Just
and
further...
also just to say that the range of proficiencies required under the Queensland Auditor Scheme is quite similar to the range of proficiencies that Paul just mentioned.
Yeah. There's a couple of questions in the chat regarding fees and upgrading. Just a bit further to Gabby's note there is we've had a long analysis of our costs, and so for those that are upgrading is probably the wrong word, but applying from going from becoming a general to then become a specialist. If you're already certified, or if you had submitted an application prior to 1 July this year, there is a discount. But for those who are starting their certification journey at any point post then, there will be the one fee going forward for applications, because we realised that the cost of certification process was not closely met by the discount. So going backwards quite quickly with those ones. Just wanted to add a bit more detail on that. There is a question on the subjectivity in the definition of a specialist? And are they looking for a competent consultant with good general knowledge of contaminant, or looking for a specialist as per industry understanding on what a specialist is? Can we provide an explanation on what they consider a site contamination specialist to be and how this aligns with the minimum experience requirements?
Paul, I'm happy to kick that off if you like. As the presentation indicated, the Environmental Practitioner Scheme has a number of categories of specialist practitioner. And you might have noticed on the list there ecology or environmental impact or social impact and contaminated land. And so we are not looking for the super specialist within the contaminated land category. Now, that's not to say that we don't want to deter people from applying, but that's not the intention of the scheme. We are looking for someone who has focused their career in contaminated land management, excuse me, for 8 out of the last 10 years in a range of fields within that area of practice. So as Paul said, we are looking for the practitioner who is genuinely conversant and confident about and can speak with credibility to a regulator or a client about the various areas of work within the contaminated land arena.
Anything to add, Mike?
Well, yeah, I agree entirely with Warren, and I just revert back to the requirements of the Queensland Auditor Scheme, which talks about the broadly based experience through a range of projects and contaminants and varying in complexity, and should have also 2 years relevant experience as a project manager of multidisciplinary teams involving contaminated land assessment, management and remediation. So we are looking for somebody with that broad range of experience that runs through the sort of typical stages of contamination investigation and analysis, right through remediation and validation, with perhaps a touch of risk assessment in there as well, which broadly reflects the core competencies that Paul mentioned earlier, which, as I said previously, are very similar to the Queensland Auditor Scheme. So yes, I think we're not after somebody who specialises in risk assessment, but rather somebody who can do all the components of contaminated land assessment and remediation, and if necessary, understand broadly a reasonable understanding of, say, risk assessment, but can call in somebody with expertise in that area and understands the process. So whilst it's not micro specialization as Warren stated, it is a specialization in contaminated site work, and bearing in mind that the fundamental certification here is certified environmental practitioner, and then you move on to the specialization, as Warren said, in various different areas.
Thanks, Mike.
Paul, could I quickly just add, in Queensland, the applicant who is confident and experienced in being the principal author of a Qld is, in general, the type of person that would put a credible application together. As long as that application demonstrates proficiency in other areas of work, such as familiarity with site remediation and health risk assessment and the other areas of work that's been listed in this presentation.
Wonderful. Now, there doesn't seem to be any more questions coming through the chat. Final one, before we'll then hand over to Georgina to talk a bit about the ACLCA Queensland Mentoring Program. How does CEnvP tackle any unconscious bias and conflicts of interest from the interview panel and candidate? Warren, while you've got your mic on.
That's something that we'd be very concerned about. If there was a perception of unconscious bias, it's something that we would wish to investigate further. So any complaint of perhaps some unprofessional conduct in an interview before an applicant is something would give us great concern, and we would investigate the cause and develop a solution. Having said that, there's a great deal of responsibility on the chair of an interview panel, and the chair is expected to monitor the conversation and to make sure that there is no unreasonable bias or judgmental conversation or decision making during the interview. The program office will be talking to the chair prior to and after the interview, and the chair and the panel members will each prepare a report on the interview, which I can assure you is vetted in great detail by the program office and by the board members. And for contaminated land practitioner applications, Mike and I are directly involved and reading through all of those documents for each application.
Anything, Mike?
Well, just a simple comment, which would be if an applicant, any applicant applies for certification, certainly will not be interviewed by a panel member that works for the same firm, for example, or perhaps has worked for the same firm. So the panel members have to show, before they're selected, independence, and would also have to declare any form of conflict of interest. And that runs through to the BARC system that Paul mentioned earlier, where the board ratifies applicants. If, for example, an applicant comes through from a company that one of the board members works for, that board member will state a conflict of interest and not be involved with that process for that particular applicant.
Thanks, Mike. And that's right through the process, from registrar through to board level. And as Mike mentioned and Warren alluded to, is the office, as part of the putting together a panel, will have this information requested of the panel members, and part of that is to understand whether do they have any conflicts of interest, and also to the applicant. So both will have that opportunity prior to dates being set to make that known. And also, obviously, each certifying practitioner and certified practitioner are bound and have agreed to abide by the EINZ Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct, and that again talks exactly to this. So there's a lot of confidence that we do have in the process. Okay, Mike, Warren, Gabby, thank you for your support today. I will now hand over to Georgina. Thank you for everyone that joined in and listened and asked questions. We will, in due course, send out the meeting slides and the webinar slides, and also a link to the video. So thank you all, and Georgina, it's over to you.
Yep, thank you.